At the beginning of the story, we are told that demons actually used to live here on Earth with humans, and in times of stress or danger, they would actually protect humans by acting like their guardians. The story starts to unfold, and the female lead, Do-hee, is introduced. She is shown running away from someone in the intense darkness of the night as mist surrounds her, terrified of her pursuer. She suddenly stops to look ahead and discovers that someone is approaching her. She wonders whether or not the person in front of her is a danger to her life, or if he will help her. Looking at the situation, she realizes that she has no other option but to seek help from that approaching stranger. So Do-hee starts running to him. Before the mystery is revealed, we are taken to a moment from 200 years ago. This history takes place at a makeshift church that seems to be built inside a tent. Devoted Christians pray to God while they are down on their knees, seeking protection from the evil demons, guided by the priest. Ironically, in just a few minutes, a man dressed completely in black clothes enters the tent with his face covered by a hood. The moment the praying Christians lay their eyes on that man, they start screaming that a demon has arrived, and they all flee, screaming for their lives. This demon, named Jong-gu-wan, jumps up on the pedestal in the front and takes off his hood to reveal his face. Gu-wan had come just to spread terror, and his presence was enough to accomplish that. He's just about to leave, but a little girl throws a cross at him, grazing his cheek and leaving a nasty bleeding cut. The priest rushes over to the little girl to get her out of there safely, but she refuses to leave and does not even budge. Gu-wan picks up the cross that the girl threw at him, and he hands it back to her, deciding to be merciful and not cause trouble where it is not needed. He leaves as swiftly as he came while the cut on his cheek heals before he even steps out of the church, as if it were never there in the first place. He then snaps his fingers and is transported to another place in a matter of a second. His belief is that humans have 3 different enemies, the first being their own bodies, the second being their very own desires, and the third being evil spirits. He eventually reaches the bank of the sea while walking. That is where he sees a poor fisherman who is trying to catch fish, but turns out to be unsuccessful in all his attempts. Gu-wan walks up to the fisherman and initiates a conversation with him. He cunningly throws a bait by asking the fisherman if he would like to end his hunger. The man replies, saying yes, he does wish that he was not hungry, but no one can help him because there are no fish close by in the water. Gu-wan disagrees with his statement by saying that the waters are full of fish in an attempt to manipulate him. He then snaps his fingers, and fish start jumping out of the surface of the water, such that the poor fisherman sees fish as far as he can see the water. The man is taken by awe before his brain finally processes what just happened. He turns toward Gu-wan and says to him that I know exactly what you are, and then proceeds to call Gu-wan some kind of goblin. After hearing this, Gu-wan feels insulted and raises his voice a little bit. The man further continues to guess, insulting Gu-wan with each incorrect assumption. The man gives up guessing, and then asks him what he is. Gu-wan replies that he is a demon of the underworld, the same being that humans call evil spirits. The man does not believe this and says that maybe his hunger has reached such a level that he has started to imagine the absurdest of things. The moment he completes this statement of his, a huge fish jumps straight out of the water and comes right towards him and lands right in his arms. After experiencing such a grand display of power, he actually believes what Gu-wan said to him and accepts that he is actually a demon. The fisherman then asks Gu-wan if he can really fulfill any wish that he has. In response to which, Gu-wan suddenly spawns a contract in his hands and reads it out, which states that the fisherman's wishes cannot be fulfilled for free, so they must make a deal. The man asks Gu-wan for more details about this deal, to which he answers that the deal will last for 10 years. For the next 10 years, the man will never be hungry. But once the 10 years are over, his body will die and his soul will be sent to the underworld. The man then asks him what the underworld is. He replies that it is the same place humans call hell. The man was so hungry that he did not think about the consequences at all. He simply wanted to get rid of this hunger of his. So he accepted the deal. Gu-wan then takes a needle and pokes it into his finger, then uses the man's blood-covered fingertip to stamp the contract. This is exactly how Gu-wan takes advantage of human desperation and uses greed to get humans to fall into their own traps. The man ends up catching a lot of fish, and he then thanks Gu-wan very much. Gu-wan says that now he will meet the man after 10 years, knowing that the man will be begging for his life by then, and so Gu-wan walks away. We are brought back to the present time, to the year 2023. Present at the 2023 Korea CEO Award function, where our protagonist Do-hee is present. A man approaches her and starts to flirt with her while mistaking her for a waitress at the event. But at that very moment, the winner for the 2023 Korea CEO Award is announced, and the winner is none other than Do-hee. The man who approached her is left shocked and speechless. She then proceeds to walk to the stage to receive her award, and that is when we find out that she is the CEO of Mirai Group, one of the leading food and beverage companies in Korea. The next day, Do-hee comes across some recently released news. The news was an article about her company's newly launched chilling juice, in which there was wrong information about her product, which was written wrong on purpose. Do-hee asks her secretary, Miss Shin, to uncover the details about this article. She then proceeds to head to her second office, but Miss Shin stops her and says that she cannot ignore things like these anymore, to which she replies that she does not have the time to reply for all of these useless blind dates. Miss Shin says that Madame Ju, who is already not happy, will not get any happier. At that very time, Do-hee gets a call from Madame Ju, whom she refers to as Almighty Ju. Do-hee picks up the phone call, and before Mighty Chu has the chance to say anything, Do-hee asks Madame Ju if she got done with her checkup. Madame Chu then tells her that Miss Shin has already told Do-hee where she has to go today. She tries to give an excuse by saying that she has something very important to do. After this, Madame Ju responds by saying that she will also stop getting her treatments done. She says that if Dodo does not go on her date, then she has no interest in getting her treatments and checkups done. Do-hee responds by saying that she agrees to go on the date, so Madame Ju should also get her treatments and checkups completed. After hearing this, Madame Ju ends the call. Do-hee then turns to Miss Shin and asks her, how long will she have to bear the guy on that date? Miss Shin replies that she only has to bear that guy for half an hour, so only for 30 minutes. Do-hee then turns around and leaves for her date. After that, the next scene begins. And as it begins, we can see Gu-won walking around in a room full of shelves, and each shelf contains a clock on it. The moment a clock strikes 12, Gu-won leaves to go get his prey, who in this case turns out to be the leader and boss of a mafia gang. This boss was relaxing inside a steaming hot sauna, while his guards and gang members stood outside the gate of the sauna as his security. Right then, everything stops, and Gu-won spawns. He approaches the gang leader while holding the contract in his hand. He shows the contact to the gang leader and tells him that his 10-year time is over. The gang leader then throws a sundial right at Gu-won and starts to run away, but this was all of no use. So he tries to bargain with Gu-won, and he starts to request more time than what was promised in the contract. But Gu-won declines all of his bribes and offers and replies by explaining that a deal was made, and no matter what he is offered, he will not accept it, and he will take his soul with him to the underworld. The mafia leader made the deal with Jong Go-won to fulfill his ridiculous greed for money, but now the 10-year time frame of that deal is over. So the mafia leader begins to make a lot of offers, and even makes extremely ridiculous and selfish offers, such as when he says that the Gu-won can take the souls of all of his goons in return for leaving him alone. Gu-won was not even ready to budge, so he declined every single offer. When the gang leader realizes that none of the offers will work, he tries to hit Gu-won, but he fails, and his own heart starts hurting, and the pain is so intense that he falls down. While Gu-won stands over the mafia leader, he bids him goodbye and tells him that he will die of a heart attack. At that very moment, the man dies. Gu-won walks over to the man, shuts his eyes, and then proceeds to leave. The goons of the mafia leader run into the room just to find their leader dead, so all of them are left in complete awe. And on this note, the scene ends. The next scene begins with Gu-won being in his office. We are shown that the mafia leader's clock disappears, so this means that the clock represents the time a person has left to live after making a deal with Gu-won. Then Do-hee is shown walking inside a restaurant, where a waiter approaches her and tells her that a certain customer has booked the entire place. It is also coincidentally her birthday, so she thinks that Madame Ju told the blind date that it was her birthday. She then tells the waiter that she is actually the guest of the customer who booked the entire restaurant. The waiter then guides her to the man, her blind date. The blind date is reading a newspaper when she approaches him, so his face is covered by the newspaper. Right as she sits down, she lets the blind date know that she is already married to her work, so she does not really have any interest in guys. The blind date then lowers the newspaper that he was reading, and he reveals his face. It turns out that the blind date is actually Gu-won. Do-hee is looking at his face. That is exactly when Gu-won makes a savage statement by saying that he does not care whether she marries her pillow or she marries her business. He also jokes around that if she goes around telling everyone her personal information, he would like to know the details of her bank account. After she hears this, she starts laughing and asks if they ever went to the same school. He straight up answers by saying no. She then asks him if they have ever dated earlier in the past, and he also replies with a no to this question. So her facial expression goes straight and bland, and she says that if they have never dated before or gone to school together, then why is he not showing any manners? His reply was that no human has any respect in front of him. She gets angry after she hears this and gets up to leave. But just as she is doing that, she receives a text from Madame Ju asking if everything is going well on the date, and she also texts her that if something goes wrong, Do-hee already knows what Madame Ju will do to herself. So she takes a seat again, and decides to bear it just for another 30 more minutes. Gu-wan had actually booked the entire restaurant so that he and his blind date, who turned out to be Do-hee, could enjoy a nice peaceful meal without anyone nearby to disturb them. However, on the other hand, Do-hee actually ended up finding the situation quite awkward. After noticing this small issue of awkwardness, Gu-wan thought about what the best solution could be, and then he decided to respond to the situation by suggesting to her that there were plenty of other luxurious and high-rated restaurants in the city near them. In turn, Do-hee retorted very boldly, suggesting that if Gu-wan felt that way in the first place, he should go and take his business to those nearby places instead. Immediately after this, she turned her face away. Feeling infuriated by Do-hee's response, Gu-wan's thoughts raced with frustration. These thoughts were calling her things like annoying, frustrating, or irritating, and even all three of these and more. Meanwhile, all the way across town, Do-hee's actual intended blind date sat in a completely separate restaurant, browsing through the entirety of Do-hee's profile. The profile revealed a tragic fact about her past through a post, which was that she was orphaned at the young age of 11. She was then adopted by Madame Ju of the Mirai Group, and now she actually manages their main business. It became visibly clear that Do-hee had mistakenly arrived at the wrong restaurant, making the mistake of believing that Gu-wan was her blind date. Initially enjoying a peaceful meal, Do-hee's questioning ended up disrupting Gu-wan's peace and tranquility. He finally had enough, so he got frustrated, and he blurted out things, asking her if she could just sit quietly, and then exclaiming how Do-hee had disturbed him enough already. Upon hearing this, even Do-hee exclaimed that she didn't want to come here at all. She then began to urge Gu-wan to stay polite just for a few more minutes and correct his behavior, citing his recent rudeness towards her. In response, Gu-wan replied by letting her know that Do-hee had actually made the biggest and rudest move by coming there. Do-hee countered, stating that Gu-wan had behaved rudely with her first, and she was merely reflecting back the truth. She suggested they should consider planning out reasonable excuses to explain to their families why their relationship had not worked out. Now visibly irritated, Gu-wan confronted Do-hee, questioning her intentions and actions. Do-hee responded by stating that she did not wish to engage in any of this in the first place, and that she was merely following the orders of a higher authority. Shockingly, Do-hee inquired about how one could refuse the orders of the Almighty. She was actually referring to Madame Ju, whom she called Almighty Ju. Gu-wan started to feel a bit nervous and started considering that the command of the Most High was the order of God, leaving him no other question but to ask her who she actually was and who had sent her there to him. Do-hee calmly grabbed her business card from her purse and handed it over to him, asking him for his business card in return. However, Gu-wan hesitated and firmly stated that he does not give his personal information to complete strangers. Undeterred, Do-hee then suggested that Gu-wan might also have been forced into this same situation. She then proposed that they both work together to find a solution. Reluctantly, Gu-wan handed over his business card, revealing himself as the owner of the Sunwall Foundation, though Do-hee remained unaware of this fact. And on this note, the scene ends. In this scene, Gu-wan launches into a lecture about his foundation, starting it off by asking Do-hee if she knew about his legendary foundation. The newspaper featuring his poster serves as evidence, showcasing his dedication. He then proceeds to outline how his organization actually champions traditional arts such as singing, dancing, acting, and traditional painting, with the aim of enriching cultural influence and ushering in a renaissance for all future generations. The narrative then shifts to Gu-wan, expressing his bewilderment at her apparent lack of awareness regarding his foundation. Irritated by his reprimanding tone, Do-hee interjects, making it known to him that she is familiar with tradition, while subtly hinting at her more modern perspective. Gu-wan then asks her what the actual involvement of this Almighty Ju is in this, and what her order is. These leaves Do-hee kind of shocked. He then asks her what is actually going on over there. She responds by letting him know that now that he has asked, they should discuss the blind date. He's confused and mutters the word blind date out of his mouth, to which she responds by saying that the entire reason the both of them were sent here was to try and form a relationship between the both of them. After hearing this, he was left shocked, and his first question was whether God was trying to set them in a relationship together. Do-hee starts laughing and thinking that it was a joke since she has Madame Ju's name saved as Almighty Ju in her phone, but she found it funny how he made her God over that. This is when he finally understands that the Almighty Ju is a human, and he says that she was the first human ever to make him feel nervous. Just as Do-hee's timer of 30 minutes ends, some goons enter. These are the same goons who worked for the mafia leader, whose 10 years ran out earlier. As she begins to head out of the restaurant, the mobsters and goons make their way further into the restaurant. They start causing chaos and havoc as soon as they enter the room. The first act of havoc they do is to push an innocent waiter out of their way. All that the waiter was doing was bringing some cake to the table, but the goons did not care about him at all. As a result of the push the waiter gets from the goons, he loses his balance, causing the cake to go flying up in the air, almost as if it were suspended in the middle of the air. The cake was on its way to fall on Do-hee and ruin her fabulous clothes. However, lucky for her, Jang Go-won was extremely quick and ready to jump right into action. Not only does he manage to push Do-hee out of the cake's path, but he also manages to catch the entire platter of cake before it even gets the chance to splatter on the ground. In Do-hee's eyes, he did not just save the cake, he also saved the day as he quickly came to her rescue without any hesitation at all. She was extremely impressed by him, so impressed that she could not help but stare at him. Her heart started to beat so fast as if it were in a race, and the fact that she was in such close proximity to him did not help. Before she messes up and starts to act like an absolute fool, she uses the need to freshen up as an excuse to go or run away to the bathroom. Once she had left, Gu-won remained still seated, since his eyes and gazes were fixed on the cake that was right before him, and as a matter of fact, he had been waiting to enjoy that cake in peace and quiet. Just the mere sight of the cake itself made him instantly feel relieved. He knew that the cake would have been completely ruined and inedible if he had not intervened at the perfect moment when he did. He slowly and elegantly lowered himself right onto a nearby chair. His movements were extremely delicate, precise, and focused. Meanwhile, Do-hee locked herself in the washroom and could not even stop thinking back to the moment Gu-won had saved her and her dress by moving her out of the path of the cake, which was en route to fall on her. Her heart kept pounding with a mix of hope and uncertainty. She just could not help but wonder if Gu-won had ordered the cake for her birthday. This same thought brought a faint blush to her cheeks as she entertained herself with the idea that perhaps, just maybe, he had a surprise in store for her. Her admiration for Gu-won surprisingly started to grow with each singular moment that passed by, even despite the initial dislike she had for him. But right as Gu-won reached his hand out to take the first bite of his cake, which he was eager to try, the peaceful moment he was looking forward to was absolutely shattered. A sudden commotion started, and it filled the air as the mafia boss's goons set to storm over to where Gu-won was seated at his table. The goons started to demand answers from Gu-won regarding his boss's sudden disappearance. His voice was very low and clearly threatening, based on his tone and expressions. The tension in the room suddenly became extremely tense, and Gu-won's desired and long-awaited moment of quiet and peace was abruptly interrupted and disturbed. However, his desire and craving to just feast on his cake became so strong and overpowering that Gu-won gestured for them to wait. His tone was extremely firm, but it was still very composed. He explained as calmly as he could that he had specifically made a reservation at this certain restaurant an entire month ago, just so he could enjoy and savor the moment to enjoy this exquisite cake. Gu-won requested the goon allow him to savor this long-awaited moment before beginning to address any other matters. The goons did not know how to react to this, so they did not know how to proceed. So all they did was pass confusing looks and gazes at each other. Without having any other concerns, Gu-won savored each bite of the cake. He was extremely calm without any feeling of nervousness or being worried despite the intense tension in the air. Then the first goon made an attempt to pounce on him. Gu-won very neatly and cleverly, in a skillful manner, changed the direction of the attack, redirecting it with nothing but a newspaper he found near him. Everyone was absolutely left in shock after he displayed a small act of agility. As the goons looked around at each other in astonishment, the one who just attempted to attack Gu-won suddenly vanished into thin air, leaving all of the rest of them confused and perplexed. Upon spotting the same goon who vanished photographing Gu-won's newspaper, the fear they felt greatly intensified, and then the goons began to demand Gu-won tell them about his identity and about his accomplice. As a response, Gu-won folded the newspaper he had in his hand and began striking each of them on their heads, causing each of them to disappear one by one. This action caused the leader of the goons to tremble with fear. Ultimately, Gu-won managed to capture and trap all of them within the confines of that newspaper. At that exact moment, Do-hee returned from the washroom only to find that the cake was missing. She became greatly confused, so to get rid of this confusion, she asked Gu-won where the cake went, and she also reminded him it was for her birthday. Gu-won, in a very troubled and bad mood, started to insult her, saying that the cake was not for her, and after the insults, he started questioning her, asking why he should even care if it was her birthday. Do-hee felt extremely insulted, and she was also very hurt by his behavior and his words, so she left. As the group journeyed back, Gu-won's mood soured from the recent noisy argument. He asked about the article's author. Miss Shin disclosed that it was Su-an, Madame Ju's daughter, and also the president of their subsidiary, Mirai Apparel Company. Do-hee was puzzled over why they couldn't let her be. Their return was tainted with tension, reflecting the unresolved conflict. Gu-won's frustration lingered, a silent storm among them. The revelation added weight to their journey, weaving a thread of unease into the otherwise peaceful trip. Their quest for tranquility was overshadowed by the lingering discord. She suddenly notices a news report about the ongoing power struggle within her group. This indicates that the battle for the company's chairmanship has commenced among its own owners. This triggers a flashback about her group, which was founded by Madame Ju. Madame Ju has 2 children, her elder son, Seok Min, whom she doesn't consider capable of managing the group, and her second daughter, Su-an, whose husband resides abroad because Su-an has always dreamed of living in Paris since her childhood. Su-an has twins, Austin and Justin, while Seok Min has a son. Madame Ju's brother also has a son, Seok-hoon, who is also a contender in this power struggle as he oversees Madame Ju's other company. Ultimately, the one person Madame Ju trusts above all others is Do-hee, whom she adopted 17 years ago. Since then, Do-hee has been paramount to Madame Ju, who has entrusted all her work to her. This has caused Madame Ju's children to harbor resentment towards Do-hee, though they dare not express it in her presence. Do-hee is very aware that she is like a virus to them, a presence they wish to eradicate. However, Madame Ju is reliant on Do-hee for everything. Returning to the present, Do-hee receives a call from an unfamiliar number, identified as Tae-jun, the former head of her group's financial team. Tae-jun informs Do-hee that he possesses information that could elevate her to the position of chairman within her group. However, he insists on discussing this matter in person rather than over the phone, instructing Do-hee to contact him later if she wishes to learn more. Before Do-hee can inquire further, Tae-jun abruptly ends the call. Uninterested in the power struggle, Do-hee confides in Mission, remarking on how now even these individuals are attempting to involve her in their political machinations. Do-hee receives a message from her grandmother implying that she might be dying. Concerned, Do-hee rushes to her grandmother's side, only to find her peacefully sleeping, alive and well. Madame Ju calls Do-hee, who is still reeling from the earlier confusion. Despite her initial anger, Do-hee listens as Madame Ju muses about mortality and the importance of good deeds. Madame Ju's words strike a chord with Do-hee, who is reminded of the fleeting nature of life. Finally, Madame Ju hints at a surprise for Do-hee, leaving her intrigued yet cautious. Despite his aversion to celebrating birthdays, Do-hee's grandmother insists on marking the occasion. In an effort to appease her, Do-hee participates in the celebration, cutting the cake she offers. As they reminisce about the past, his grandmother fondly recalls their shared memories, likening their journey to a horror movie. She lovingly advises him to listen to her, pointing out his rebellious streak that dates back to his childhood, when he would often run away from home to go to college. She mentions an instance when he picked her up in a long car on her first day of college, explaining that he wanted to protect her from being treated like an orphan child by her peers. In a playful exchange, Do-hee's grandmother questions why he intervened in her college relationship by paying off her boyfriend. He explains that he did so because the boyfriend's wife disapproved of him, and he believed the boyfriend was not suitable for her. She questions the reasoning behind contacting the man, to which he replies with a lesson on not judging based on appearances, emphasizing the boy's inner goodness despite any outward appearance. However, she counters, stating that his appearance was the only positive aspect, highlighting his rude and uncouth behavior. Curious about his looks, she pulls out his photo and inquires about his appearance in person. She then reveals his identity, identifying him as Gu-won, but the man rudely declines the blind date arrangement, disappointing Do-hee and her grandmother. They spot Gu-won in the auditorium of his institution, where Ga-yong the girl is practicing a traditional dance. Sitting next to him is his assistant Park, the same man from 200 years ago. Gu-won had originally signed a 10-year contract with him, which has since been extended numerous times, explaining Park's continued presence. A call from Do-hee reminds Gu-won of his neglected cake, prompting him to hastily depart. Park notices his distressed state and inquires about the reason. Gu-won explains that he missed out on eating his favorite cake due to his busy schedule. Park probes further, asking why he was so preoccupied. Gu-won reveals that he was on a blind date, and during Ga-yong's dance performance, she unexpectedly screamed, questioning his date's identity and comparing her beauty to hers. Shocked by Ga-yong's outburst and wondering how she heard from such a distance, Gu-won is interrupted by Park, who leads him away. Meanwhile, Tae-jun informs the duo about an impending threat. This incident reveals that Park and Young have been with Gu-won throughout their past lives. Additionally, it becomes apparent that Ga-yong has a crush on Gu-won, Although he is mostly irritated by both her and Park, Gu-won admits to keeping them alive unnecessarily, implying a deeper connection. Butler Park acknowledges Gu-won's reluctance to be alone, suggesting that he has kept them around for companionship. However, Gu-won, showing a hint of arrogance, asserts his immortality and questions the need for companionship. He dismisses the other's understanding of immortality, claiming that it offers a different kind of enjoyment. He then instructs them to focus on their tasks. Park arrives at the beach, a place she frequented with her parents, triggering a wave of memories spent with them. As night falls, Gu-won gazes at the clock tower, which appears oddly significant to him that day. Meanwhile, Park and Ga-young sit on the beach until midnight, the end of Ga-young's cursed birthday. A cab arrives, but the driver's demeanor raises suspicions. Ga-young questions his identity, only to discover that he is the same killer who murdered Tae-jun. The driver attempts to render her unconscious with chloroform, revealing that her death is linked to Madame Ju. Ga-young, however, feigns unconsciousness and manages to escape the car, beginning a dramatic chase scene. Meanwhile, Gu-won from the clock tower notices the unfolding events. He gestures towards Ga-young, indicating his awareness of her situation. Ga-young, startled by his unexpected appearance, wonders whether he is there to save her or harm her, sparking a mix of fear and hope in her mind. Do-hee's suspicions grew regarding the potential collaboration between the killer and Gu-won. Whenever she sought Gu-won's assistance, he insisted on striking a deal first. Despite her urgency, Gu-won remained firm. Unbeknownst to her, he concealed a knife in his hand throughout their interaction. With a sense of urgency, she reluctantly agreed to his terms. Gu-won's demeanor shifted suddenly, intensifying her unease. He made a remark about his usual policy of not assisting without a signed contract, but expressed a strange impulse upon seeing the man before them. Seizing the moment, he made a threatening move toward her. Sensing danger, she made a dash towards her car, aiming to escape. However, her plans were foiled when Gu-won forcefully threw the killer onto the hood of her car, leaving her in a state of shock. As Gu-won advanced towards her, his eyes filled with fury, she was overwhelmed with fear. Acting swiftly, she fled from the car, seeking refuge across the bridge. Gu-won approached her, extending his hand. The symbol of the Holy Cross in his palm began to glow as he spoke, reminding her of their deal. Locked in each other's gaze, they were suddenly interrupted by the sound of the killer's approaching car. Panic set in as she watched the vehicle speed towards them. Gu-won attempted to intervene, but to no avail. As fear gripped her, she involuntarily released his hand and began to fall. Without hesitation, Gu-won leaped after her, but as they plunged into the water, he lost consciousness. Do-hee found herself sinking, then inexplicably rising. Witnessing Gu-won's plight, she dove to rescue him, but struggled to bring him to the surface. Miraculously, as she grasped his hand, she managed to lift him, and the Holy Cross in his possession transferred to hers. Then overwhelmed, she too lost consciousness. When Do-hee regained consciousness, she found herself lying on the shore. Beside her stood Gu-won, who held her hand. As she became fully aware of her surroundings, Gu-won couldn't help but notice that the Holy Cross mark on his hand had vanished, the very mark that contained his powers. Do-hee, gathering her thoughts, approached Gu-won and expressed her gratitude. "Thank God we both survived." However, Gu-won still felt dizzy. When Do-hee instinctively touched her own head, Gu-won's attention was drawn to the Holy Cross mark now visible on her hand. Acting on impulse, he reached for it. This unexpected transfer of the Holy Cross left them both bewildered. As waves crashed against the rocks, threatening to engulf them, the Holy Cross in Do-hee's hand began to emit a radiant glow, halting the water in its tracks. Witnessing this miraculous event, both Do-hee and Gu-won were left stunned. Gu-won in particular was astonished by the sudden return of his powers, considering they had failed him just moments before. She questioned him, stunned by the situation and his identity. Gu-won in response queried her actions. Their mutual bewilderment hung heavy in the air as they exchanged bewildered glances before Do-hee succumbed to unconsciousness. Gu-won acted swiftly, preventing her collapse and triggering a flashback of their plunge into the water, where the Holy Cross transferred from his hand to hers. Despite this, Do-hee remained unconscious until Gu-won finally roused her and pulled her to safety. Later in the hospital, Do-hee regained consciousness, haunted by the memory of her waterlogged descent. Gripped by anxiety, she confided in Miss Shin about her dreadful nightmare. Gu-won's sudden gesture of care, tenderly massaging her head, caught her off guard, deepening her sense of disbelief. With evident affection, Gu-won reassured her, expressing relief at her awakening. Doubts still lingering, Do-hee questioned the reality of her situation, feeling as though she might still be trapped within her dreams. Gu-won's steadfast presence and Miss Shin's explanation about her condition grounded her momentarily, Yet the sterile hospital surroundings only fueled her anxiety further. It seemed she had been unconscious for 5.5 hours, as Miss Shin informed her. Gu-won immediately inquired about her well-being, observing her movements for signs of distress. Miss Shin, noticing her peculiar behavior, finally questioned why she was acting so strangely. However, Gu-won was preoccupied with caring for her, urging her to follow the doctor's advice and rest for a while. Taken aback by his concern, she stared at him in surprise. Sensing the tension, Miss Shin excused herself to call the doctor and left the room. As she exited, Do-hee turned to the person who had saved her, questioning their actions. Gu-won, overcome with frustration, threw his handkerchief to the ground and demanded to know what was happening. Surprised by his sudden gentleness, she pondered how he had become so polite, especially towards her. Gu-won's response reminded her of her previous request to be treated with respect the next time they met. She chuckled, thinking about the implications of their interactions now that Miss Shin might assume they were dating. She inquired about the whereabouts of the man who had attacked them. Gu-won assured her that he had provided all the necessary information to the police and that the perpetrator would soon be apprehended. Concern evident in his gaze, Gu-won then asked about her well-being, specifically noting her wrist. Do-hee admitted to feeling some pain in her body and reciprocated the concern, asking about his condition. Gu-won confessed that he wasn't doing well at all and had been eagerly awaiting her recovery. As he gestured towards her hand, she noticed the tattoo on his own hand for the first time, prompting her curiosity about its origin. Before she could attempt to remove it, Gu-won intercepted her hand, preventing her from doing so. Despite his protests, she persisted, trying to erase the tattoos one by one, even resorting to splashing water on them. Gu-won urged her to stop, fearing that she would ruin it with her attempts. Suddenly, Do-hee's memory flooded back, recalling the events of the previous night. Falling into the water, her desperate struggle to reach the shore, and the surreal sight of water suspended in the air. Shocked by her recollection, she mused, "Maybe I drank too much last night." Turning to Gu-won, she bombarded him with questions about their whereabouts, their activities, and the origin of the large tattoo adorning her hand. Determined to rid herself of the unfamiliar mark, she attempted to move past him, but Gu-won stood his ground. Ignoring his protests, Do-hee threatened to force her way through, but Gu-won remained steadfast. As she tried to pull her hand away, he tightened his grip, insisting she refrain from removing the tattoo. Their exchange escalated, with Do-hee asserting her ownership of her hand and Gu-won claiming ownership of the tattoo, bewildered by its presence on her skin. Frustrated by Gu-won's refusal to release her, Do-hee issued a final warning, counting to 3 before attempting to slap him. However, Gu-won's mysterious power intervened, immobilizing her other hand and preventing her from striking him. Surprised by her inability to move, Do-hee struggled against the invisible force, her efforts futile. Observing the holy cross glowing in Do-hee's hand, Gu-won released his grip, causing his power to dissipate. Startled by the sudden release, Do-hee inadvertently struck Gu-won across the cheek as she attempted to regain control of her hand. Angered by her actions, Gu-won accused her of attempting to steal his tattoo, expressing regret for having saved her life. Incredulous, Do-hee reminded him of her role in rescuing him from drowning. Incredulous at his insistence on claiming ownership of the tattoo, the argument between them reignited, fueled by confusion, frustration, and a growing sense of betrayal. Shin arrived with the doctor, who conducted a thorough checkup on Do-hee, reassuring her that she was absolutely fine and only needed some rest to fully recover. With those words, the doctor and Miss Shin departed, leaving Do-hee and Gu-won alone. Despite Do-hee's insistence that he leave, Gu-won remained by her side. Shortly after their departure, police officers arrived to inquire about the incident, directing their questions to Gu-won. Upon seeing him there, they assumed a more probing tone, asking about the nature of their relationship. "We learned that you both met on a date, and it was your first meeting, so are you planning to get married?" they inquired, seeking clarity on the situation. Both Do-hee and Gu-won vehemently rejected the notion of marriage, with Do-hee asserting her lack of interest in such matters, and Gu-won expressing his desire to remain single indefinitely. Miss Shin affirmed to the police officers that indeed, they had only met on a date. However, as their argument ensued, an alert message interrupted them, flashing on Gu-won's phone. It indicated that a contract had expired, necessitating his departure to collect the soul of the designated individual as payment. Urging Do-hee to take care of herself, especially her hand, Gu-won promptly excused himself and left for his office. Meanwhile, Miss Shin took measures to prevent news of Do-hee's accident from spreading beyond their immediate circle. She implored the police not to mention Do-hee's name in any reports, as they had refrained from informing Madame Ju about the incident to spare her worry and prevent any potential losses to her company. Upon reaching his office, Gu-wan discovered Butler Park seated in his chair, engrossed in reading Gu-wan's book. As Gu-wan entered, Park hastily attempted to conceal the book, but Gu-wan had already caught sight of it. Requesting its return, Gu-wan watched as Park made a swift escape, clutching the book tightly. "I have the right to read it too," Park insisted as he ran, flipping through the pages as he fled. Intrigued by what he had read, Park shared a startling revelation from the book. If Gu-wan failed to close a new deal or failed to collect a soul on time, they would suffer a fate of spontaneous combustion, condemned to burn for millions of years. Shocked by this revelation, Park could hardly believe what he had just learned. However, Gu-wan swiftly seized the book from him, scolding him for delving into its contents without permission. Park, attempting to justify his actions, reminded Gu-wan of their close relationship, likening it to that of family. Curious about the book's significance, Park pressed Gu-wan for more information, but Gu-wan remained adamant, emphasizing the importance of keeping the contents of the book at a distance. As Park inquired further, Gu-wan simply reiterated the book's significance, warning Park to steer clear of it. Gu-wan securely stowed the book in his locker, and Park, visibly concerned, sought confirmation about the dire consequences mentioned within its pages. Gu-wan affirmed the truth of the passage but offered no further details, admitting his own lack of full understanding of the matter. Handing Park Do-hee's card, Gu-wan instructed him to conduct a thorough investigation into her background, including her family history, past relationships, academic history, and personal preferences. Perplexed by Gu-wan's sudden interest in this woman, Park questioned the extent of his curiosity. In response, Gu-wan shot him an irritated glare, prompting Park to jest about her potentially stealing his heart, referencing their recent encounter. Gu-wan's already troubled mind was further agitated by Park's teasing, and he instinctively attempted to exert his power over him, only to realize his powerlessness. Hastily retracting his hand, he tried to conceal his frustration. However, Park, noticing the absence of the holy cross mark on Gu-wan's hand, inquired about its disappearance. Gu-wan, caught off guard, offered feeble excuses and attempted to divert Park's attention, but Park's keen observation persisted. "Where is your tattoo gone, and why do you look so strange today?" Park pressed, sensing something amiss. Gu-wan continued to insist that everything was fine, but Park's suspicions had already been aroused. Determined to confirm his doubts, Park fetched a glass of water for testing. Despite Gu-wan's attempts to intervene, he was powerless to stop Park, his abilities having vanished. This revelation surprised Park, who grew increasingly concerned about the implications. Expressing his worries to Gu-wan, Park questioned the consequences of his newfound powerlessness for their work and livelihoods. Fearful of the potential repercussions, Park fretted about their financial stability, particularly in light of his recent car loan. Gu-wan, already on edge, grew increasingly irritated by Park's concerns. Gu-wan dismissed Park's concerns about his lost powers, asserting that his current priority was trivial compared to the situation at hand. When Park inquired further about the status of his powers, Gu-wan concocted a flimsy excuse, claiming he had temporarily lent them to someone else. Though skeptical, Park seemed to accept this explanation. Displaying Do-hee's card, Park speculated whether she had somehow stolen Gu-wan's powers. Gu-wan, perplexed by the sudden transfer of his Holy Cross tattoo to Do-hee's hand, instructed Park to investigate further into her background. With that, Gu-wan left to attend to his duties, including the collection of a soul. Park, still puzzled by Gu-wan's loss of powers, questioned how he would fulfill his task without them. Gu-wan, displaying a hint of arrogance, assured him of his competence, emphasizing his extensive experience as a devil spanning over 2 centuries. Just as he says, he leaves to go and collect the soul. However, the man whose soul needed to be collected was an athlete and a boxer, who actually thrashes Gu-wan later on, since he also has a lot of men with him, while Gu-wan was all alone. So Jung pulls out the boxer's contact and shows it to him, reminding him that the 10-year time limit has ended, so he demands that the boxer's soul leave his body and go to the underworld. Instead of listening to him, the boxer actually starts threatening Gu-wan. Jung replies that these humans will never learn. He tells them all to come at him one by one, but instead of going one by one, everyone starts advancing towards him all together. Jung also starts to slowly move backwards, and he tells them to come one by one since all of them were well-built boxers and athletes. Then all of them pounced at him and began to beat him up. He replies that this is no way to show sportsmanship, so they should come one at a time. After he realizes that they will come together, not one by one, he also gets into form and starts to beat them up. But since they are really buff and well-built bodybuilders, they just kept shaking it off and coming right back. They were so strong that when Jong strikes someone too hard, he himself feels the pain. He tries to get away, but that is when more men arrive from the way he was planning to go. So now he is surrounded by them. Jong then threatens them and says that he does not want to do this, but he has no other choice. He puts his hand in his coat just to bring his hand out to flip them off. As he does this, he jumps out of the window and lands in some garbage to break his fall. When he gets back up, he looks at the same window to find the boxer there, and he yells at the boxer that he will be back, and then the boxer will regret this, and then he flips him off again. So the boxer does the same and flips him off back again too, and Jong then walks away and leaves. And on this note, the scene ends. The next scene starts off by showing us how Do-hee is discharged from the hospital. She is back at her house and she is telling Miss Shin about how Gu-won was also alone with her in the restaurant. Later, when she was being chased by a killer, she was again approached by Gu-won. She continues to explain to Miss Shin how she believes that all of this cannot be a coincidence and that it must definitely be some sort of plan. Miss Shin then asks her what she thinks the plan is and what she wants from her. She replies that he wants to make some sort of deal with her since he said that he wants to make a deal with her and that he will only save her from the killer if she makes a deal. This is what he thinks the motive is, to make some sort of deal. Miss Shin then says that because of the false article that Soo-an, Madame Ju's daughter, had published against their new juice, the shares of their company had gone down by 10%. She asks Miss Shin to find out Soo-an's schedule so she can meet up with her and discuss the problem and find out what she wants. But at that moment, she must leave to go and meet Madame Ju. And on this note, the scene ends. The next scene begins by showing the killer who takes the mask off his face, and this is the same killer who kills Mr. Tae-jun, the guy who wanted to give Do-hee some information. We are shown that the room is very dimly lit. There are multiple masks on the table, and there is a board on a wall. On that board, there are pictures of a lot of girls, but this killer's primary focus is on Do-hee. There is no knowledge about how he knows Madame Ju or why he wants to kill Do-hee. Back in the alley, when he tries to kill Do-hee, he says to her that all of this is because of Madame Ju. At this moment, someone knocks on the door, so they go to open it. When he opens the door, he finds out that it is the homeowner. It turns out that a few people wanted to practice acting, so they moved into the house on a rent basis. Maybe this killer has killed those actors in practice. And maybe he has taken the identity of one of those actors and is using that identity to live there. The owner wanted to meet the boss of the actors since he had not met him for a few months. First, the bosses used to go and meet the homeowners to go and pay the rent in cash while they were there. But over the past few months, someone has been paying the rent by transferring the money online. So the homeowner wanted to meet the bosses. The killer thought quickly at his feet and said that the bosses were actually traveling abroad on a business trip. The homeowner had met with the acting team that lived in that house, but the owner had never seen this guy, the killer, before. So he asked him if he might be a new member of the crew since he had not been seen here before by the homeowner. The killer quickly responds by agreeing and telling the homeowner that he had just joined the crew quite recently. The killer did not want to talk to the homeowner anymore because he was asking a lot of questions, but the homeowner would not leave, and instead he would ask more questions, so his mind started pondering. While the killer's mind is racing with thoughts, the homeowner spots the blood on his hands and asks him if it was blood as confirmation. The killer was quick with his response and said that it was fake blood. He added that they needed a shot with some blood for their next scene in the shooting, so they had to go for the best quality one. However, since it also smelled very bad, the homeowner said that it looked so real that if someone saw it, they would actually think that he had really killed someone. But now the killer started getting really angry. The homeowner said that if the director comes, tell him to meet the owner at least once. The killer did not want to take any more chances, especially because the homeowner had seen his face, so he invited him in under the pretext of a leak in the ceiling, and also killed him. Do-hee goes to visit Madame Ju, and while she is with her, she remembers what the killer says about Madame Ju being the reason behind her death. Coincidentally, Madame Ju is also discharged from the hospital on the exact same day. Madame Ju also finds out about the 10% loss in the company's shares, so she asks Do-hee if she knows who is behind this huge loss. Do-hee chooses to lie, and instead of telling her that it is Madame Ju's daughter, Soo-an, behind it, she chooses to lie instead, and she says that she will fix all of this. She also tells Madame Ju that she has asked Miss Shin to find out who is behind all of this, and she says that when she finds out, she will tell Madame Ju. Then Do-hee helps Madame Ju leave the hospital and takes her back to her house. When they reach Madame Ju's house, they start to water the plants in the garden. She suddenly remembers what the killer said to her about Madame Ju being the reason for her death. So she asks Madame Ju if Madame Ju has ever kept something from her. Madame Ju says no, of course not. To which she asks again if Madame Ju is sure that she has never kept anything from her. Madame Ju's facial expressions change and go full serious and bold, and she says that she is sure she has never kept anything from her. And additionally, Madame Ju says that she tells Do-hee about everything. Do-hee says that she believes Madame Ju since she is the only person Do-hee can trust, even with her eyes closed. Ju-seo then comes over and greets everyone, and then hands Madame Ju a file that shows her the report of the earring sales in his company. Madame Ju looks at the reports and hands them right back to him. He then says that she has never complimented him, and she should compliment him, at least sometime. She replies that this is your work. Why should I compliment you on your work? So nonetheless, you should work very well at it. They all start laughing at this reply by Madame Ju. Once all the laughter is over, Do-hee gets up and says that she will be heading out and that she will go to the office. Ju-seo says that he will also go to the office with her. Madame Ju looks at the two of them standing together and says that since both of them are very workaholics, they will make a very good and splendid couple. And then she recommends that the both of them get married to each other, and then they can vote and look after the business together. Do-hee ask her not to start on this marriage topic again, please? Madame Ju then said that there is no problem between the two of them getting married since they are not related by blood. Ju-seo also responds by saying that what Madame Ju said looks like a joke. Do-hee tells him that Madame Ju is dying to get Do-hee married, so he should not take her seriously. Madame Ju responds by saying that when she dies, the both of them will realize. Do-hee tells her not to worry since God won't be calling her up anytime soon. After saying this, the both of them leave for the office. Even though Ju-seo did bring his own car, he says to her that he did not bring his own car. So he says to her that he can drop her off at the office in her own car. So this gives us a hint that maybe Ju-seo really might like Do-hee, and maybe he does really have feelings for her. He thought that it would be just him and her, but it turns out he was mistaken because Miss Shin was also there in the car. While they are in the car, he is driving, and he says to Do-hee that since Mr. Jong saved her life, he deserves some compensation. She responds by saying that if she ever sees him again, she will pay him for his favor. Ju-seo then asks another question, asking who actually was that Gu-won guy. Do-hee responds by saying that it's no one special. It's just the guy with whom she went on a blind date. Ju-seo was so shocked by this that he slammed his foot on the brake pedal, causing the entire car to jerk and then stop in the middle of the road. Do-hee was perfectly fine, but because of the jerk, Miss Shin hit her face on the dashboard, and Seok Mine started bleeding. So as a result of this little incident, she sent him to the back seats and continued the journey by driving herself. The both of them ask her from the back seat if she's okay, and she responds by saying that she will be okay, as long as she is the one driving. Once they were in the back seat, she asked him why he suddenly slammed his foot on the brake pedal the moment he heard that she went on the blind date. He got extremely nervous, but he thought quickly and responded by saying that he had never heard her mention anything about dates, marriages, or relationships. He also adds that she is so young right now, and very young for marriage. She then replied by saying he already knew the reason. He gets shocked, his mouth opens wide, and he excitedly asks her if she is getting married. She replies with a straightforward no, and says that Madame Ju forced her to go on that blind date, so she had no other option but to go on that date. She also said that she has no plans to get into any relationships or marriages in the near future. He replies that, in that case, he will also not get married early. She notices his words and asks him what he meant when he said them in that case. He gets extremely nervous yet again, and just like before, he thought quickly on his feet and said that these days it is a trend for young girls. He points to Do-hee as an example, who plans on getting married later, so guys also have to wait longer so they can get married to girls that are in the same age group. Do-hee's eyes then go on his tie, which is extremely jumbled up and messed up. She tries to fix it for him, but she cannot fix it because of how much the both of them are laughing and playing around. The scene ends on this note. The other scene begins on the other side of town, and it starts off by showing us that Yong-gu Wan is browsing through the demon manual book to find out everything about what happens when the Holy Cross mark is transferred, and how he can get it back. Despite going back and forth through the manual multiple times, he cannot find anything related to this topic in the manual. So he calls Butler Park and asks him to tell him everything he has learned about Do-hee. The butler responds by telling him that she has a blood type of AB+, and that she is the CEO of the company, Miri Group. She is known as the Princess of the Mire Group in the industry. However, in her office, she is known as the Devil, since she is known for going to any extent and any level of strictness and rudeness when it comes to work. She wants every single thing to be absolutely flawless and perfect. So all of her employees would need to expect all kinds of work before they got their tasks. She also does not belong to Madame Ju's family. Her father was an electrical engineer and her mother ran a beauty salon, but the both of them got into an accident 17 years ago, and that resulted in the both of them losing their lives. Do-hee was then adopted by Madame Ju of the Mireille Group, because her father and Madame Ju had worked together to form the Mireille Group's first ever company, Mireille Electronics. Ever since she was a young girl, she was extremely smart and hardworking. She would always rank at the top of her classes in school and at the top of all of her classes in college and university. While she was in university, she created his first company, which is now the biggest company of the Mireille Group, Mireille F&B, or Food and Beverage. She then reaches her office, and the moment she entered the office, everyone stopped slacking off and immediately got back to their work. She also gets to work right away. Because of that article posted by Soo-an, the company's reputation and stock suffered a huge loss. So in order to get all of that reputation and stock prices back, she browses through everything she can do. She is in a meeting when Miss Shin approaches her and whispers in her ear the details about Soo-an and her whereabouts. She immediately leaves the meeting and tells everyone to keep working and not stop. Miss Shin says that she wants to come with her, but she says no, and says that she must do her own work herself. On the other side of town, the butler also tells Jong that Do-hee is currently single because none of her past relationships worked out properly. Butler Park says that this is everything he could find out. Jong says that he will now go and do what he does best. When his butler asks him what he is going to do, he says that he is going to go and set a trap for a human since that is what he does best. We are now shown Soo-an in a shop trying on new dresses in front of the mirror. She's accompanied by her manager. She asks the manager, if Do-hee's company had faced a 10% loss in stocks, how much money have they lost? The manager answers and tells her the amount, which was 260 billion won. Soo-an is really happy after she hears this, and she says that it is only fair if they send her a bouquet of flowers to support her in these tough times. And then she starts laughing. Do-hee comes up behind her and says that there is no need for all of that. Soo-an and the manager are left in complete shock. They are both speechless for a few minutes before Soo-an finally musters up the courage to speak. She asks Do-hee what she is doing at the shop, especially when her company is facing such a huge loss. Do-hee starts to smile and responds by saying that stocks always go up and down, but now they will only go up. The manager is asked to leave the room, and Do-hee and Soo-an take a seat. Soo-an asks if Do-hee will be blackmailing her, to which she responds by saying no. She just says that since you leaked my personal information, you better be careful about who can leak your personal information too. Do-hee shows her some pictures she captured of Soo-an cheating on her husband by having an affair with another man. At this moment, she received a call from Jong, who says that he has gotten extremely sick after the accident and that he wants to meet her. She asks him how that is possible since he was perfectly fine at the hospital. He is quick at his feet, so he responds by saying that this just started a few days ago, so he started getting sick a few days after the incident. So Do-hee invites him somewhere nearby to meet. Do-hee then turns back towards Soo-an and says that all the tampering she did to the article should be fixed within one singular day, and by tomorrow, Do-hee should be receiving good news about her company. Otherwise, these photos will go viral. And when they reach Madame Ju, she takes a pause, looks at Soo-an, and says that she knows what will happen next. Soo-an then gets up and starts to threaten Do-hee by saying that if her mother, Madame Ju, finds out about this, then something bad will happen to her. Do-hee replies instantly, asking Soo-an how she can even dare to give her threats. Do-hee also adds on that Soo-an should remember that Do-hee never hides anything from Madame Ju, so Soo-an should think twice before she does anything. She also tells Soo-an not to fight with her, and if she really does feel like fighting with someone, she should fight with her brother. She then takes her leave after saying this, leaving Soo-an speechless. In another place, Madame Ju kneels before the church father, her voice trembling with guilt as she confesses her sins. She knows she deserves punishment in the afterlife, but her greatest fear is not receiving forgiveness, specifically from Do-hee. A small flashback transports us 17 years back, when Do-hee's parents tragically died. Madame Ju, frozen in shock, had watched helplessly as their car burst into flames before her eyes. The weight of guilt has burdened Madame Ju for years, consuming her with remorse and driving her to seek redemption and forgiveness, especially from Do-hee. Butler Park is deeply contemplating whether his boss, Gu Wan, can effectively perform his job, feeling increasingly worried for his safety. Despite this concern, he has full confidence in Gu Wan's ability to easily trick people, as Park has fallen prey to him not just once, but twice before. We are taken to a vivid flashback of Park's past life, where he was on the brink of suicide due to the overwhelming hopelessness stemming from his failing business. However, Gu-won entered his life like a sudden ray of light, and Park signed a seemingly life-changing contract with him to become the owner of the famous 2000 restaurant at that time, firmly believing it would solve all his seemingly endless problems. Once again succumbing to the charm of greed, Park decides to sign the contract. In a familiar, almost ritualistic binding ceremony, Gu-won pricks Park's trembling finger with a needle. This simple yet symbolic act triggers vivid memories of Park's previous life, when he made a similar deal with Gu-won. In that life, Park used to catch and sell fish, becoming quite wealthy in the process. However, after 10 long years of indulging in fish, he tragically met his end while eating one, and his soul was tormented in hell by the vengeful souls of the fish he had consumed. Remembering this haunting memory, Park explodes into a furious rage and attacks Gu-won, driven by an overwhelming sense of betrayal. But it's too late. He has already signed the contract, and like his previous lives, Park is bound to Gu-won once again. Breaking out of his thoughts while thoroughly enjoying his delicious food, Butler Park wonders to himself how, if the boss still had his extraordinary powers, he could have easily and effortlessly trapped anyone who dared to defy him. However, now that the boss doesn't seem to possess those formidable powers anymore, a question looms large in Butler Park's mind. Will Gu-won now be able to catch Do-hee in his cleverly devised net? Unbeknownst to him, Ga-young, with her keen senses, had overheard this quiet muttering, and filled with curiosity, she slowly approached Butler Park. She calmly and innocently asks him how the boss lost his once feared powers. Butler Park, caught off guard by her sudden inquiry, is almost about to blurt out the truth about how Do-hee now wields Gu-won's powers. However, upon noticing Ga-young's penetrating gaze, he decides to remain silent for the moment. Despite his attempt to keep the truth hidden, Ga-young, having spent a lifetime observing his every move, knows how to skillfully extract information from him. With a subtle but menacing display of her knife, she effectively intimidates him, compelling Butler Park to finally reveal the truth about how Gu-won has been stripped of his once mighty powers. Do-hee arrived at the designated meeting place where she had asked Gu-won to meet her, her heart heavy with anticipation and uncertainty. Doubt crept in as she recalled his excuses for being sick on the phone, leading her to question why he seemed to be avoiding her. Was there a hidden reason behind his absence? Did he no longer want to see her? These thoughts swirled in her mind, casting a shadow over her expectations. Fully convinced that he would not come, she decided to call him. However, just as she made the call, her gaze lifted and her breath caught in her throat. There, on the other side of the fountain, was Gu-won, walking towards her with a confident stride. In that moment, time seemed to stand still as she found herself captivated by his presence. Despite the confusion and unanswered questions, one thing was clear. She couldn't deny the undeniable charm of Gu-won's handsome face. Upon seeing Gu-won approach, Do-hee's gaze remained fixed on him, her heart fluttering at his nearness. She quickly ended the call and questioned him, her voice laced with curiosity and a hint of playfulness, wondering why he had made the excuse of being ill when his face appeared to be glowing with health and happiness. Gu-won, taken aback by her directness, started to feel nervous, his cheeks flushing slightly, asking if she really thought his face was glowing. Dismissing the topic, Do-hee mentioned the previous misunderstanding, her tone tinged with regret for wasting his time and even buying him food. She offered him money as compensation, her eyes reflecting sincerity, but Gu-won refused, as he stated that he didn't need it, and that he had as much wealth as she did. Do-hee asked Gu-won what he wants instead of money, then look for a way to get even? He replied that since the incident involving her, he had been experiencing a strange change in his body, feeling unable to concentrate on anything, his thoughts constantly drifting to her, unlike anything he had ever felt before. Do-hee suggested he see a psychiatrist. Her concern was evident, but Gu-won refused, his eyes locked on hers, insisting that only she could fix him. He took her hand and drew her closer, his touch sending a shiver down her spine, claiming she was responsible for his condition and that he had been feeling strange since he met her. Gu-won then gazed deeply into Do-hee's eyes, leaving her breathless and taken aback as she found herself also staring back into his. The duo find themselves at a point where Gu-won is driving Do-hee somewhere with him in the car. Trying to ensure space between them, she explains that she is merely assisting him in spending time together, ensuring he doesn't misinterpret it as a date or something else. Despite her clarification, Gu-won attempts to hold her hand, suggesting a romantic gesture. Do-hee, perceiving his actions as overly hasty but still tempted to give in, offers her left hand, but Gu-won insists on her right. Their hands intertwine, and Gu-won, now holding her hand, accelerates the car. Confused by his sudden speed, Do-hee questions his actions, to which Gu-won casually replies that they are just going on a short drive. However, Gu-won's mission comes to light as the tattoo on Do-hee's hand features a glowing holy cross, indicating Gu-won's powers have been restored. He changes the traffic signal from red to green and speeds through traffic to collect the boxer's soul before midnight, or else it would be Gu-won receiving the punishment. Meanwhile, the boxer, who had agreed to sell his soul, heads out of the gym with his agreement scroll in his hands. He eventually discards it and begins chatting with his friends about going out. Suddenly, Gu-won arrives in his car and points a makeshift gun from his fingers towards the boxer, who dies shortly as Gu-won had access to his powers, and so his contract burns. The clock indicating his lifeline vanishes from Gu-won's office. Gu-won accelerated the car once more, prompting Do-hee to question his actions. He casually dismissed her concerns, stating that he was simply playing a prank with his friends. Do-hee then noticed the route and asked about their destination, to which Gu-won cryptically replied that they had one final task. He drove her to an area near the river, where couples were engaged in romantic activities. Feeling overwhelmed, Do-hee thinks that things are moving too fast, and to add to it, Gu-won suggests they do something there. Nervously, Do-hee expresses her concern about their recent acquaintance and the inappropriateness of their actions in a public place. Despite her firm no, Do-hee's nervousness at the possibility of something romantic happening is evident. Gu-won steps out of the car and approaches her window, suggesting they go outside. Do-hee responds by reminding him of the legal consequences they could face. Gu-won listens attentively, seemingly amused by Do-hee's conflicted feelings. Gu-won wonders why going for a stroll around the river could lead to criminal charges, which surprises and embarrasses Do-hee, who thought there would be more. As they walk to the quieter and more secluded part of the path next to the river, they come to a halt. Do-hee uses this moment of silence to make it clear to Gu-won that she was not creating romantic scenarios in her, but instead deterring him from trying to create any, as generally this was considered a romantic spot. However, Gu-won is focused on his own agenda and suddenly grabs Do-hee's hands. He gently asks her if she can hold his breath for a bit. Do-hee is stunned, wondering what Gu-won is thinking as he inches closer and closer to her. For a second, Do-hee believes that he is going to kiss her as his hand comes up to cup her neck, but her misunderstanding is short-lived, as suddenly a devilish smirk comes across Gu-won's face and pulls them both into the river. Underwater, Do-hee struggles to hold her breath, but Gu-won is stuck on trying to get the tattoo to transfer back to his hand. Despite Do-hee's attempt to push aside and float to the surface, he refuses to let go and keeps trying. Do-hee realizes that she is going to have to take matters into her own hands and lands him a good kick, which momentarily stuns Gu-won, and so Do-hee uses this moment to escape to the surface. Coming out of the water, she gasps for air. She's only catching her breath by the time Gu-won comes out of the river too. His only source of concern is still his tattoo, or lack thereof, as even after coming out of the water, the Holy Cross had not transferred back to his hand. Seeing his lack of remorse, Do-hee starts screaming at him, demanding to know what he wanted to do to her, as she was nearly drowning. Panicked, she continues screaming, questioning why he wanted to kill her, as she almost drowned twice because of him. She expresses her fear of someone trying to harm her and laments the mess he has caused in her life. Gu-won tells her to calm down and focus, but she insists on her right to be upset, flooded by emotions. Gu-won tells her that he needed to check something and believes she would have refused if he had told her beforehand. This infuriates her, leaving her feeling deeply betrayed by his lack of concern. She throws money at him, declaring their account settled and leaving in anger. Meanwhile, Gu-won goes back to his car and is still preoccupied, contemplating how he can retrieve his Holy Cross if it doesn't return even after he enters the water. Out of nowhere, Butler Park appears, and Gu-won, angered, confronts him about how he was able to find him. Butler Park manages to calm Gu-won down, expressing surprise that instead of charming Do-hee like he thought he would, Gu-won ended up drowning her. Gu-won questions Butler Park's presence at this point, but Butler Park explains that Gu-won was the one who had instructed him to keep an eye on Do-hee, and that is exactly what he had been doing. Without wasting time, they leave together to find Do-hee, as Gu-won needs to stay in contact with her to use his powers. Without Do-hee, survival would be incredibly challenging for him, and he realizes that now. On the other hand, Do-hee was quite upset and was returning home. In another corner of the city, the killer who had murdered Tae-jun examines his phone that he had kept after killing Tae-jun. He had gone through it, but weirdly there was a photo of Do-hee's as a child on his phone, which the killer then placed in a locker for safekeeping. Moments later, another hidden man retrieves the photo from the locker and takes it to a figure who might be his boss, although his face is not shown yet. His boss checks the phone, which only contains one last call, and that too was made to Do-hee by Tae-jun. The shot focuses on the hands of this man, indicating that he had ordered the killer to murder Do-hee. On the other end, Ga-young had collected all the information on Do-hee that she possibly could. Taking angry steps, she kept the information aside and focused on her sword dancing. However, impending doom was promised by her actions towards Do-hee. Back towards the legacy of Madame Ju, an eerie silence has spread over all family members. Madame Ju, under the dim light of her study, prays to God to give her the strength to tell the truth to Do-hee. Her son, Seok-min, is seen bird shooting at night, which is completely opposite from the innocent facade he puts on in front of the rest of his family, and his son has a nervous breakdown while checking into a mental health facility. The intentions of this family are unknown, but they do not hint at peace at all. Suan also gets a call from her publisher, who wants to change the article they wrote about Do-hee, costing Suan more money. She curses her heart out at Do-hee. Her curses are merely background noise in a busy parking lot, but her promises to harm Do-hee are set in motion. Lastly, the cherry on top is revealed. Seok-hoon sits in his office late at night, carefully examining the tie that Do-hee had made for him. His intentions are unknown, but his feelings for Do-hee are becoming clearer and clearer. Do-hee is already upset as she walks down the street to clear her head. Looking around, her eyes stumble upon an advertisement screen showcasing the latest news segment. That's when she sees the news of Mr. Taejun's death, which is reported as him committing suicide. Her eyes are glued to the screen as she realizes that just yesterday she had talked to Mr. Taejun on the phone. He was going to give her some information and it sounded urgent. Her heartbeat races as the feeling of impending doom increases in her, minute by minute. In her distracted state, Do-hee does not notice a bike speeding right past her. The bike rider was on a mission to throw acid on Do-hee. He almost succeeded too, but Gu-won intervened at the last minute. He throws himself in front of Do-hee, taking the hit himself as the acid is thrown all over his back. It takes a moment for Do-hee to recover from the reeling shock of what just happened. Breaking out of her stupor, she checks Gu-won for injuries, but Gu-won is always one step ahead of her. He grabs a hold of her wrist, activating the powers of the Holy Cross. In the blink of an eye, the power courses through his body, and his wounds are healed. Putting on a cool and suave act, he simply tells Do-hee to take care of herself as she has something that is valuable to him. But Do-hee is still unable to digest this magical element that Gu-won has introduced into her life. In search of clarity, she asks Gu-won what he is. Gu-won believes that by now he has nothing to hide from Do-hee, and so he lets her in on the truth about him being a demon, the very same devil that humans fear. This does not help Do-hee get her answers, but she gets enough closure to move on to more important things. Both of them head together to the police station, where they report the incident that just happened. The police do their thorough due diligence, and then confirm to Do-hee that the attack attempted on her was using sulfuric acid. Had Gu-won not protected her, Do-hee could have been seriously injured, as sulfuric acid is fatal for humans. The police notice a repeated pattern of attacks on Do-hee and come to the conclusion that someone is purposefully targeting her. They try to solve the case quickly by asking Do-hee for any leads to who might have done this, but Do-hee chooses to be calculating in her response. She offers no person of suspicion to the police and instead leaves them to do all the work on their own. In the meantime, Gu-won had been waiting outside for Do-hee. His irritation for humans and their delicate nature increases the longer he waits, coming across all kinds of pathetic criminals. His attention is captured by a lineup of suspects the police align at the side of the waiting room. The object of interest was a woman who was completely out of her wits. The police identify her as No-suk, but no further information is given about her. No-suk approaches Gu-won herself, who is scared to see her so close to him as he did not sense her approaching. She heeds his warning that his life is under turbulence by now, and is being held by a thread while death could approach him quickly. Gu-won does not need to hear more of this crazy woman and takes his leave, just in time as Do-hee came out of the interrogation room. They both take their leave. Gu-won decides to drive Do-hee back home, but unrelentingly starts scolding Do-hee for not being able to keep herself safe. He warns her about what might have happened if he hadn't arrived on time, his main concern being that his valuable tattoo would have been destroyed. Do-hee, however, is still stuck processing the fact that Gu-won is a demon. She inquires more from him, and he simply explains his nature of making deals with humans. When she asks what kind of deal, Gu-won misleads her by telling her that he fulfills human dreams. They bicker back and forth as Do-hee tries to understand the extent of his powers and their source, with Gu-won growing insulted and irritated at her questioning. However, Do-hee realizes that to fulfill his duties, he would need the powers of the Holy Cross, and the only way for him to access his power would be to be in close proximity to Do-hee. It's as if a bulb goes off in her head at the moment, and she suggests that Gu-won become her bodyguard. It would be a win-win situation for the both of them, as Do-hee would be safe from her attacker while Gu-won would get to access his powers when he wishes. However, Gu-won refuses to become her bodyguard, saying he would not protect a worthless person. Do-hee tells him to understand that he is protecting his tattoo, but Gu-won still refuses. While the idea was good, Gu-won thought no incentive was enough to get him to protect a human. Do-hee tries to reproach him with the idea that if she dies, he won't get his tattoo, so he should think about his benefits too. This momentarily catches Gu-won's attention, and he looks at her tattoo. Stuck in thought, but still reluctant to become a bodyguard for her. He gets impatient at his lack of acceptance and questions if he can come up with something better. However, Gu-won remains stubborn. Even though he had no better idea, he would never think to become her bodyguard. As they reach the apartment, Gu-won starts to guide her out of the car into the building elevator. Do-hee is curious about his actions, as it seems like he is trying to protect her. She uses this opportunity to once again bring up the idea of becoming her bodyguard, but Gu-won is quick to shut it down. His only aim right now was to get access to the building security camera footage in hopes of catching the attacker. As they enter the elevators, they both miss the attacker who was lurking around. He was hiding in hopes of catching Do-hee alone again and finishing his attack. However, Gu-won was by Do-hee's side, and that disrupted the attacker's plan. He left, seething at another missed opportunity in a grand display of his psychopathic nature. Back at his home, Gu-won complains to Butler Park about the impending concern for his Holy Cross tattoo. He frantically overthinks about the state of his tattoo if something happens to Do-hee, his worst scenario being if the tattoo is gone and Gu-won is left to burn in the fire. Butler Park pays heed to his concerns and suggests that he agree to become Do-hee's bodyguard if he is so concerned about the safety of his tattoo. However, Gu-won lets his ego get the best of him once again. He haughtily laughs at the thought of him, a powerful demon, being a bodyguard to a lowly human. It was against his nature. However, Butler Park pays close attention to this matter, reminding Gu-won that demons originally coexisted with humans and that it was their sole duty to be the protectors and guardians of humans. Becoming a bodyguard to Do-hee would not be as against nature for demons as Gu-won was thinking, but Gu-won still refused any reasoning. He wanted to be free to enjoy his life as a demon and not take on any more responsibilities than he already had in his role as a demon. Trying to get Gu-won to crack under pressure, Butler Park questioned him about what would happen if Do-hee told other humans about Gu-won being a demon. Gu-won was quick to brush it off before he realized that something similar had happened to him before, and he had to erase the memories of all those who found out. This could be troubling for him, as now he does not have the power to freely remove people's memories as he wishes. The thought of his own true helplessness brought Gu-won bristling hot anger, and so he kept his demonic book aside in realization that it was proving to be of no use for his problems. There's a vague sense of impending trouble, especially when Do-hee's name comes up. She casually sends a message asking if the decision to become her bodyguard has been made. With no immediate reply from Gu-won, Do-hee playfully resorts to threats, casually suggesting that she'll use laser treatment to make his tattoo disappear if he doesn't agree. Gu-won, feeling slightly provoked, worried if she would actually go through with what she was saying and, if she did, what would become of his tattoo. Despite this, he remains firm in his decision and refuses to give in to her demands. As Do-hee casually gazes at his tattoo on her hand, she wonders if there truly are powers within it and what would happen to the fate of this tattoo. Regardless of Gu-won's refusal to protect her, she can acknowledge that he has saved her twice already. When she felt like there was no way out, Gu-won showed up, and that made her feel safer for some reason. Then Do-hee's heart sank as she heard about Taejun's suicide on the news segment playing on her TV in the background. The memory of their last conversation just yesterday flooded her mind. Taejun had called her with some special news related to the company, a conversation now forever etched in her memory. With a heavy heart, she remembered that she had to call Madame Ju to share the devastating news. She couldn't shake the feeling that Taejun's death was somehow connected to that last phone call. Madame Ju, while trying to remain composed on call, couldn't hide her own concern. She urged Do-hee to focus on the company and not dwell on what-ifs, assuring her that everything would be taken care of within their group. After hanging up with Do-hee, Madame Ju's facade crumbled. She knew she had to act. Immediately, she contacted her secretary, Mr. Yan, and requested the financial reports for the past 10 years. As she reviewed them, her hands trembled. The discrepancies she found were not just numbers, they were a betrayal of trust. She realized that her negligence in overseeing these matters for years had led to this moment. She knew then that things couldn't continue as they were. The next morning, Gu-won makes his coffee, seeming quite pleased. Butler Park is shocked to see such a shift in his mood from last night. When he asks what brought this on, Gu-won says he's trying to stay positive, noting that his tattoo hasn't disappeared and that it's still safe, although in the hands of Do-hee. However, Gu-won realizes he won't be able to reclaim his tattoo easily. He'll have to create a scenario where the tattoo transfers from Do-hee's hands to his hands, just as it did when it transferred from his hands to hers in the water, recreating all the conditions. The weather, temperature, and everything else need to be exactly the same. Then maybe he'll get his Holy Cross tattoo back. He was still not sure, but this was the only way to get it back that made sense to him. Butler Park remarks that he is kind of making sense, but is soon distracted by the smell of something burning. In a moment or two, the faint smell of something burning gently wafts past Gu-wan's nose. It is then, in that fleeting moment, that they both notice with astonishment that one of Gu-wan's fingers is slowly beginning to burn. This sight shocks them both to their core. Butler Park, his face a mask of concern, tries to blow out the fire. He wonders whether the time for Gu-wan to burn with unlimited fire, as foretold in the book, has come so swiftly. This question ignites a wave of panic in Gu-wan, for he realizes he does not know the answer. Nevertheless, he is focused on his determination to act. Together, they attempt to extinguish the fire by blowing on it, but the flame keeps burning his finger. For a moment, it seems as though nothing is happening. Then Ga-yong, in a state of wild panic, rushes into the kitchen. Horrified by the scene before her, she instinctively grabs a nearby jug of water and pours it over Gu-wan's hands, successfully extinguishing the fire. As the tension eases, Gu-wan is struck by the realization that he must do his duty and collect the soul of a human quickly, or his fate will be sealed. What's more worrying to him is that he is uncertain of the exact nature of the punishment he faces. With a sense of urgency, he reaches for the phone and calls Do-hee, letting her know that he is ready to become her bodyguard. Gu-wan tells Do-hee that he is coming to meet her right away. Although quite surprised by his sudden agreement, Do-hee quickly gets ready to see him and heads downstairs to her building's parking lot where she meets him. Meanwhile, Gu-wan fills an ice bucket with a lot of ice so that, in case his unlimited fire punishment starts again on his finger, he can dip his hand in ice and extinguish it. Finally meeting Do-hee, Gu-wan hurriedly tells her again that he is ready to become her bodyguard. He agrees, as this is what she wanted, but questions why he suddenly changed his mind. She wonders what happened for him to agree after he was so adamant about refusing her last night. Gu-wan makes a lame excuse that he pondered for a long time. If humans can protect small spiders and insects, then the least he can do is protect one human. But rightfully, Do-hee does not believe him. She says that something definitely seems off in his agreement. Suddenly, Gu-wan's finger starts burning again, so he quickly hides it behind his back and dips it in the ice bucket. He hears the sound of the fire being put out in the bucket and gets curious. She tries to see behind him, but Gu-wan doesn't want her to find out his weakness. He throws the ice bucket away quickly and holds Do-hee by her arms, shifting her attention by pretending to make her focus but telling her that our fate is the same and the solutions to the problems we have are also the same. Do-hee agrees, satisfied with getting her way with this. She, however, places the condition that Gu-wan must start right away. Hearing this, Gu-wan holds her hand again, which returns his powers, and tells her that we have to go somewhere because there is a very important work to do. Saying this, he transports them, and Do-hee finds herself at the top of the clock tower with Gu-wan. While he is determined to complete a mission, Do-hee gets scared out of her wits and wonders what she got herself dragged into.